This week on For the Record, the lingering effects of the government shutdown felt on the dinner table. We sit down with Second Harvest Food Bank of Southern Wisconsin to see why food insecurity is on the rise.
There's a new level of uncertainty that we haven't seen and folks aren't used to.
Plus, we talk with the Wisconsin Farm Bureau Federation about the impact tariffs have on the ag industry.
When we don't have that certainty, it's hard to make those planting decisions.
Is there any relief in sight for Wisconsin farmers? That's all coming up this morning.
We now present For the Record.
Welcome to For the Record. I'm Ellie LaLiberte. Well, with the holiday season well underway, families across the state are looking to put food on their dinner tables. But after the government shutdown and an already tight year for many, that's becoming more difficult. According to Second Harvest Food Bank of Southern Wisconsin, 70% of its partners and programs have reported an increase in the number of people seeking assistance. We sat down with the organization's Vice President of Operations to talk about what that meant this Thanksgiving.
At a time when many folks are sort of starting to prepare their dinner tables and gathering with family to celebrate the upcoming holidays, our minds are on the nearly 147,000 Southwestern Wisconsinites who are facing food insecurity.
And let's talk about why we're seeing this gap. Is this something that we've seen slowly increasing over the years? Is there anything in particular about this year that's making it especially hard for folks?
While the government shutdown shone a light on the folks that are sort of struggling with food insecurity at the moment, hunger doesn't really have a season, and we're currently distributing twice as much food as we did during the height of the pandemic. Just steady increases. Our partners are reporting the 70% increases, and we are doing everything we can to help folks sort of meet the moment and shorten the lines outside their doors. We're currently distributing twice as much produce, and we're bringing in more and more truckloads of goods to provide our partners with no cost and low cost food.
And when you're talking about providing double of what you were before, where is that need coming from? What's causing people to need so much help right now?
The recent government shutdown really put pressure on families. 1 in 4 families in this country are living paycheck to paycheck, and this shutdown just put extra pressure on those families. A lot of working families, a lot of folks who are experiencing food insecurity for the first time, having to turn to pantries for support.
So it's a lot of new folks that you're seeing right now.
We're seeing a lot of new folks. That has just increased since the pandemic, and it's continued to increase, and we know the sort of effects of this shutdown are gonna linger, and so we're currently thinking about how we might support through the sort of recovery phase. Government building lights are back on, but we know that the effects from this shutdown will last.
And we can talk to a little bit about how you're trying to rebuild here in a second, but I wanted to kind of stay on this topic because obviously SNAP benefits were delayed for 700,000 Wisconsinites. That was a huge topic coming out of this shutdown. What does that mean for folks' faith in the food share program here in Wisconsin? Does that shake that at all?
There's a new level of uncertainty that we haven't seen and folks aren't used to. If folks can take away SNAP benefits once, there's a thought that they could take it away again. And so there's just this new level of uncertainty, whether it's our community members, our neighbors, or our partner pantries who might have to step up and help meet the moment, which those systems aren't designed to handle. So there's just a new level of uncertainty that folks are feeling.
And I wanted to ask, too, what impact did this delay have? What are we seeing as of like Thanksgiving dinner tables? What does that look like because of this delay earlier in the month?
Unreal pressure on our agencies who are seeing 70% increases in distribution. That also puts pressure on the food bank. We're having to buy more food. Our partners are having to buy more food. And so community costs as a whole are rising because of this shutdown. We think of it as a teeter-totter. When resources disappear from one end, the emergency food system has to step up and handle that. And they're not necessarily designed to handle that. And so we're relying on community support. We're relying on volunteers and individuals to give to help us meet the moment.
Is that really the solution right now, is asking the community for help, or are there other things that your organization, for example, is doing to try to kind of help what the lingering effects from the shutdown were?
Our ability relies on food, funds, and volunteers, and so those are the 3 things we call on when there is a crisis.
And have you seen success from those calls?
We have. Really impressed with the way the community stepped up this past round. It really put a spotlight on those who are facing food insecurity, but we know there is no season to this, and it will last. And so we need to find a sustainable way to sort of help folks meet the moment, and that's going to come in folks continuing to give and to continue to support.
And I want to ask too, because there was a bill that it got pulled from the assembly floor for a vote, but I wanted to kind of get your take on it because it dealt with food share. And what it looked to do was get rid of food share coverage for junk food, essentially. And I wanted to get your take on that.
We're urging policymakers and community members alike to help us meet the need. As much as possible, we try to provide folks with nourishing food, and so a big portion of what we distribute is healthy food. We're certainly in line with that, but we also urge dignity and choice, especially around the holidays when folks are, with families and sharing. We emphasize choice, and so as much as possible, we're urging policymakers to support folks in sourcing the food they need and they deserve.
Because now turning to tariffs, this has been a big conversation with grocery bills, things like that. Trump's reciprocal tariffs have been kind of a big point of conversation around the dinner table. But recently, he cut tariffs on products like beef, coffee, bananas, and other food imports. Do you think that will help provide some relief, or is it kind of something that we're already seeing the effects of?
We're hoping it does. We've been forced to make impossible choices this past year with the government shutdown and the increased need, and so we're already forced to make impossible choices, whether it's going to be milk or eggs for families. And as much as possible, if we can lower cost on goods, it allows us to provide even more to the community.
And you say those impossible choices. Talk to me a little bit about what that has looked like for you.
Our partners are having to purchase more food when their budgets are already tight. As much as possible, we want to help partners stretch their dollars as far as possible. And so as much as possible, if we can purchase and provide our partners with no-cost food, the better. Unfortunately, this year, resources have shifted. We've seen less support, and so that's required us to charge for produce and things and charge for other product that we haven't previously charged for or required our partners to pay for as much as possible. Again, we're calling on the public and the community support to help us provide our partners with the goods they need.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this funding, because I know that Second Harvest last year with the Dane County budget saw some issues and things like that. Where does the budget stand right now? Are you guys at a good place, or are there struggles there?
We rely mostly on community support. We currently don't receive any funding from the county, the state, or the federal government. We rely heavily on individual giving and donors and community members to support.
And so are you seeing enough support right now?
I don't know if there's ever enough support. I don't know that we'll ever meet the need, but we can certainly try, and the more that the community steps up and supports, the more we can do, again, in providing our partners with as much no-cost food as possible.
And I kind of want to just sum up this conversation really quickly, because I want to give context to people who are around their Thanksgiving table and are not facing food insecurity. What is this Thanksgiving going to look like for many Wisconsinites?
It's going to look different for a lot of folks this year. Again, just a level of uncertainty. Folks who, for the first time, are wondering how they might put food on the Thanksgiving dinner table or have a great time with family. There's just a new level of uncertainty. But as much as possible, we're urging community members to get involved, to give financial donations to help meet the need, and then also urging folks who might need support to visit their local pantries. Folks are encouraged to give and support, and we want to let Southwestern Wisconsinites know that the community is here for them.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
To support Second Harvest, you can visit secondharvestsw.org. And next on For the Record, we talk with the Wisconsin Farm Bureau Federation about the impacts tariffs have on the ag industry. Is there any relief in sight for farmers? That conversation when we come back. Welcome back to For the Record. President Trump has scaled back on tariffs on items like beef, coffee, and bananas as his administration is facing mounting pressure to address affordability. But is it too late for Wisconsin's farmers? We sat down with the Director of National Affairs with the Wisconsin Farmers Bureau to see how the president's reciprocal tariffs are playing out in America's dairyland. What have been the most impactful, good or bad, tariffs on Wisconsin farmers?
Yeah, so tariffs affect Wisconsin farmers in many different ways. So it's one of those things where it affects our inputs, which are fertilizers, raw materials for our tractors. And so that affects, not only the farmer, but up and down the supply chain. So we're looking at the big red tractors that you see, Case IH. Those, we have to have materials for those farms. And if those are more expensive, farmers are putting off those purchases until later time, which affects Case IH, obviously. It also affects our local cooperatives who sell the fertilizer that comes from Canada. and the seed growers as well. So it's up and down the supply chain and how it affects farmers.
And you talked a little bit about imports and getting the things you need to make everything run, but what about on the export side of things?
Yeah, that's where we start to see the prices have dropped. So you saw soybeans, which got a lot of attention. That really squeezed, when the prices went down, it squeezed our margins on soybean farmers and crop farmers altogether to where we were looking at negative margins on acres that we planted. We were looking at negative returns on those. And so we had some relief when there was an announcement of a trade agreement between the U.S. and China. And that brought prices back up on soybeans to what we saw earlier in the year. But even that agreement, there's nothing that's been really solidified. And even China's, hasn't confirmed what those purchases will be. And those purchases are, they're talking about 8 million metric tons in the last 2 months, and then 25 million metric tons over the next 3 years, which brings us up higher, but not really even to the average over the last 5 years.
So it sounds like we're talking a lot about uncertainty. What are things that you're hearing from the farmers who are feeling the impacts of this right now?
When we don't have that certainty, it's hard to make those planting decisions, and it becomes a lot more difficult in what acres we're going to plant and what commodities we're going to plant with.
So is that uncertainty really what you're hearing from folks right now?
Yeah, it's really what drives and keeps Wisconsin farmers up at night. That and the immigration policy, but tariffs are really driving what the core issue of what's hurting the Wisconsin ag economy. And without the Wisconsin ag economy, it's really the heart of Wisconsin. It's what drives Wisconsin's economy overall. And if we don't have farmers, we don't have food. If we don't have food, we can't defend ourselves as a nation.
So I want to move now to consumers too, because we're talking up and down the supply chain. But I wanted to talk too, because according to an August Yale University Budget Lab report, consumers face an overall average effective tariff rate of 18.6%. That's the highest since 1933. Let's contextualize this for people. What is the effect on consumers?
So nationwide, you're going to see a Thanksgiving dinner that's going to be a little bit more expensive. In Wisconsin, we've seen that price go down a little bit, but that's because we can source a lot of Wisconsin's ingredients for the Thanksgiving dinner here in the state. So I would encourage you, when you're shopping at the grocery center, look for Wisconsin-sourced products.
And so I want to talk to you because the president has said that these tariffs will return manufacturing back to the states. Is that a price worth paying for Wisconsin farmers?
It's a long-term goal. And right now we're going through the brunt of the short-term pain. We're supportive of the president's position and his long-term goals. We just hope that Wisconsin farmers aren't caught in the crosshairs of what is becoming a prolonged tariff and trade war.
Are Wisconsin farmers caught in the crosshair right now?
Yeah, you're starting to see that burden being pushed down onto the Wisconsin farmers. And I talked about how that affects not only the farmer, but up and down the supply chain.
And what do you see if this continues on for even longer, the long-term effects of a tariff policy like this?
Yeah, you're going to start to see Wisconsin farms continue to consolidate, and maybe that rate continues or grows. And it's what we had thought that for a long time, even the cattle industry, we talked about tariffs on the crop industry, but the cattle industry lately has been keeping a lot of dairy farms in business. The president makes an announcement that he's going to import more beef, and you see cattle prices dip down. That affects farmers in a real way, and that is really where that source of these announcements are great, but we need to have some kind of certainty moving forward.
And so do you think that certainty is anywhere in the future right now, or is it still very up in the air?
It's still very up in the air. We have announcements that are coming in, and we appreciate those announcements. We appreciate the administration continuing to work on those agreements, and we support that. But we really need to see some firming and some certainty from those agreements coming very soon.
And I want to kind of go back to that soybean deal, because that was a really big deal. I mean, people were thinking that could provide some of that certainty. You're saying that there's still things in the works there that aren't necessarily smoothing everything over.
Yeah, because of the agreement hasn't been confirmed by China. So we really need to see something written down on paper, or them putting out some kind of statement that, yes, we've agreed to these. That'll shore up the prices in the market in futures moving forward. We also appreciate the agreement moving forward, but it's not to the level that we really need. 25 million metric tons, like I said, doesn't even reach the average over the last 5 years. And so while we appreciate the agreement, we still need more. And before this trade war started with China, they were buying 60% of our soybeans. Now they're less than half. And so it's even with the agreement, it's still only half. So it's appreciated, but we still need more.
And we're talking a lot about soybeans here, but are there any other specific products that we're seeing any kind of relief on right now?
Well, the farm economy is in a bad spot right now. We have milk prices that are okay. They're not great, but like I said, the cattle market is kind of keeping the dairy farms in business right now. We're hoping that there is a review coming up for the USMCA agreement. We're hoping that review produces some better results when it comes to dairy and working with Canada. Right now they have high tariffs on protecting their own domestic supply, and we're hoping that we can lift those tariffs a little bit so that Wisconsin farmers can have a better arrangement with exports with them.
And next on For the Record, we sit down with the newest candidate in the race to fill Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice Susan Crawford's seat on the Dane County Circuit Court. Welcome back to For the Record. Well, the newest candidate in the race for Dane County Circuit Court is actually not new to that court. Judge Ben Jones was appointed to the position when Susan Crawford left for a seat on the state's highest court. But now Jones is seeking that position permanently.
I started my legal career in private practice. I was in private practice representing small businesses, municipalities, and school districts. And that naturally led me to work at the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, where I started while Tony Evers was state superintendent, then was chief legal counsel at the department for Carolyn Stanford Taylor, and for Dr. Underly before I was appointed to be judge in August of this year. And so why I want to run for election to a full term after being appointed by Governor Evers, the same reasons that I wanted to be appointed in the first place, which is Governor Evers in his appointment process was looking for public servants who had a handle on the law and who were good people. And I threw in to become a judge because of my dedication to being a public servant.
Obviously, a story that's made national headlines up in Milwaukee is with Hannah Dugan and her alleged helping of a man in her courtroom evade immigration agents. And I asked the same thing to your opponent, but if you were in that situation, how would you have handled that?
Right. It's an issue that our courthouse, the Dane County Courthouse, is thinking about a lot right now. And the judges have control over their courtroom, right? So we can control who comes in, who's allowed to stay within certain constitutional and legal frameworks. And so there are things that we can do as judges, like hold hearings telephonically or on Zoom, so that there isn't that risk of being intercepted on the way to participating in an important court proceeding. And then develop policies, and I can't, develop those policies myself as a judge outside of my courtroom as to what happens when confronted in a similar situation. But certainly it's paramount that people participating in court proceedings are able to do so without fear of reprisal, or else the system kind of breaks down.
And I want to talk to you now about political violence. It's something we've kind of seen a rise in the recent year. So earlier this year, the Joint Finance Committee rejected the governor's call to fund a force specifically for judges' security. Do you think there needs to be more protections in place for judges in Wisconsin?
The short answer is yes, and it's unfortunate. The threat of violence should not play into a fact finder, a judicial decision maker. It should not be a component in their decision making. In that, in order to make decisions that are lawful, that are just and equitable, and all of those things, a judge should be focusing on the facts, the law, and anything else that the parties will bring in argument. And the threat of violence hanging over proceedings, threat of violence to witnesses, threat of violence to litigants or to the judges themselves, distorts the way that the judicial branch is supposed to function.
And I want to kind of talk to, just kind of to wrap up our conversation, to touch a little bit on what you consider your judicial philosophy to be.
This is a broad generalization, but generally speaking, a philosophy that says take into account all context when making a decision. Take into account the historical context of scientific context. To apply the law in ways that will affect real people.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down with us. We appreciate your time.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
And that was a condensed version of our interview. The full conversation is up right now on channel3000.com. For the record, we'll be back after this. There you go. We have an update to a story we first brought you a couple of weeks ago. Wisconsin Eye, our state's version of C-SPAN, will stop event coverage on December 15th due to a lack of funding. In addition, the video archive of more than 30,000 hours of state government proceedings programming will go offline. WISI's president says programming will continue for 1 year when it gets the funds it needs to cover the network's 2026 operational budget of $887,000. The network is the first and only operation of its kind, independent of state government control.
In Wisconsin, because of our independence, which came at the extreme support of elected officials then and now, they said, we want to do it differently. We want to raise the bar of integrity. We want citizens to absolutely trust in what they see and not have any questions about who's pulling political strings. And so Wisconsin Eye really is unique in the country. It's really a treasure.
You can support Wisconsin Eye at wisi.org/donate. And that does it for us this week. A reminder, you can watch full episodes of the show as well as expanded interviews on our website, channel3000.com. Have a great rest of your weekend. For the record, I'm Ellie LaLiberte.
This has been For the Record.